Yeah, I'm not persuaded by the argument that internal communications about settlement discussions should be excluded on the basis of a rule of evidence, because those rules of evidence are not applicable in this hearing. So my recommendation is to treat them, either allow them both in or not, and be guided by the standard of whether they're relevant.
Yeah, I just think it's a difference of intent, certainly. And I had a second question, maybe for all the attorneys. Not having gone through the email in detail, mostly because I saw the ask to not consider it before I had a chance to review it in detail. Is there anything that in the email or in the applications that couldn't be introduced as evidence as it would pertain to us considering this or issue? It seems like we're just worried about bias because of language or potentially, making somebody look bad. Is there anything that couldn't be introduced as evidence in its own right without either the application or the email?
Mr. Chairman, do you want us to address that? I'm sorry, I didn't want to speak out of turn.
Oh, no, that's fine. If the board's asking a question, I assume it's kind of coming through me. So yes, please go ahead.
Sure. Just from my perspective, with respect to the after the fact permits and applications and such, and those plans that have been filed, my perspective is they absolutely can come in through evidence, because the notices of violation that are at issue here demand various corrective actions, and so we can certainly bring them in that regard. And I will say, with respect to the email, I do think it's an important distinction. And I agree. I can't disagree with Attorney Wyckoff that the rules of evidence, they don't apply to administrative proceedings. That there's no argument there. But I think the spirit and intent is that those kinds of conversations between litigants, essentially, or opponents, are not necessarily, especially because we tend to posture and they're one-sided. That is not something that is appropriate, or I know that under, I think it's 382691, which governs board appeals, that the chair should make provisions for, irrelevant evidence. And whereas I think the applications that we're asking to be submitted, because they are precisely germane to what the code officer said we have to do, is relevant here. Whereas jousting between counsel is not.
May I respond?
Yes, please.
So the applications contain corrective action, and Attorney Rachel says that's the reason that they should be admitted. So the issue before you today is whether or not notices of violation issued prior to these applications being prepared, whether or not those notices of violation contain errors. That's the issue before you. Those corrective action plans don't have anything to do with that. So, as to Mr. Dean's question as to whether or not there's some independent basis on which those applications could be put in, I would say that they're not relevant in terms of the corrective action piece is not relevant, because that's not at issue here before you. What's at issue is whether or not the violations occurred. Now, as for my email, is it independently able to be put in? I don't know. I mean, I guess that the question is, do you find anything in it relevant to the notices of violation before you? I don't know that it does. I mean, Attorney Wagner, as he stated, the bar is low as to what's relevant or not. So, if you're questioning what to do, I would say you should, let them both in, as opposed to, as opposed to as not. I mean, I don't see any real harm in letting all of them in. So I guess that's my take on it.
So Greg, Fred, Tom, any other questions? We should take a vote on this as to whether to allow in or out.
I have a question. Procedural. Sorry, go ahead.
This is Tom. I guess I go, we either let them both in or we exclude both of them. At this point, I'm just expedite this process because we're truly here just to find out if code enforcement did their job and there's no errors.
I agree. And I agree with both of those statements. So, Greg, Fred.
I think I agree that we're just here to see if there's any errors on the code enforcement, and I'm not sure if these really pertain to what we're looking at to help because that's after the fact, if I'm understanding this correctly. What they're saying, this is not what we're actually here to look at tonight, right?
That's for us to decide right now. So I think I will go ahead and I will make a motion to, I'm not sure, Attorney Wagner, you can let me know the best way to phrase this. I don't know if I should make a motion to strike or a motion to enter in.
Why don't you make it a motion to strike?
Very good. So yeah, I will make a motion to strike both the email and the submitted documents in response by Attorney Rachin. The original email from Attorney Wyckoff and then the subsequent submission of information from Attorney Rachin. I will make a motion to strike those from the official documentation for the evening. Do I get a second on that?
I'll sign it.
Okay, again, roll call vote as to whether or not to strike. Tom, yes or no to strike?
Yes, strike.
Greg, yes or no to strike?
Yes.
Fred, yes or no to strike?
Yes.
David Murch also voting to strike, so unanimously approval of striking the email and some follow-up information from Attorney Rachin from the official record. Okay, Attorney Wagner, you got a second procedural item for us tonight?
Yes, I do. The next procedural item is there was a DEP letter provided today, and I just wanted to see if there was any, if any party intended to introduce that or had any objections to that being considered as part of the evidence. Now, just to be clear, the parties can certainly make their arguments about what weight that evidence has. I'm just asking if there's any procedural arguments up front, since we did receive that today, and it's not clear to me if that's been made part of the record or not.
Can I address that?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I thought it was part of the record. That was my assumption, that it was already part of the record since it was provided by the DEP the other day, and I believe it's been provided to all counsel for all the parties. So I thought it was part of the record, and if it isn't part of the record, then I propose that it should be part of the record.
Attorney Ranch and Attorney Bronze, do you have any objections to that being part of the record?
If I might just address that, thank you. I do object to it on the basis of, I've been hearing various discussion amongst the board talking about things that have been entered in after the fact with respect to the nature of the violations, et cetera. And so I would say that that is not relevant to those proceedings. And if this board does accept it into the record, I would say that it is incredibly important to realize that it should not hold weight. And I'll tell you why. If you look at the letter itself, it doesn't provide any detail about which property they're talking about what analysis that the DEP staff member made. No authority. This DEP person has, of course, authority over DEP regulations, certainly nothing with respect to the town. And it just does seem to be a pretty apparent attempt to just bolster the CEO's decision. And so I would say, to the extent it is admitted in the record, and I would respectfully request that it isn't, but if it is, that it be given very little weight.
So if I may, I'm just going to interject a little bit here. I think the question is narrower for the board here. I think it's just is it admitted? And again, that turns on, is it remotely relevant? So I would advise the board not weigh in now on what weight it should be afforded.
And Mr. Chair, if I may,
Please.
I would just echo the same sentiment from the last debate discussion here, which is essentially it itself does not speak to whether or not the notices of violation, which are before the board themselves, include any errors or misstatements or reasons for which to be set aside. It may or may not, as Attorney Wagner points out, bolster, and I would echo Attorney Ratchen's point, which is that it is in no way binding on this board. But again, if we're speaking specifically to the point of whether or not it on its own demonstrates that the notices of violation were themselves properly done and submitted, then I think on that basis it should be kept out.
May I respond briefly?
Yes, please.
This letter is fundamentally different than the items because in this letter, the DEP provides its view that the violations, its view relating to the violations. I think that is relevant.
So I'm going to go ahead and take this to the board. We're referencing a letter that was sent on March 28th, should have received as email by Jeffrey Kalinich, the Assistant Shoreland Zoning Coordinator, Bureau of Land Resources, Department of Education of Environmental Protection, the DEP. So the question is, do we allow this as into the record? I'm of the opinion that it should be allowed, as this is just I agree with Attorney Wyckoff's statements, and that this is a review of the notice of violation and the DEP's review of it from their perspective. And so I believe that it is something that we should consider as part of tonight's proceedings. Greg, Tom, Fred, any comment, feedback?
My opinion is, I agree with you, David, that the DEP is a state organization and they should be heard, not silenced.
Comment, if I might.
Please, Greg.
Why do we have this letter? Is this something that is issued for all NOVs? Is it something we solicited? Did the town solicit this? And is it traditional for the DEP to have any bearing on their opinion matter in a procedure like this? Just
so Greg, the letter itself indicates the following: Code Enforcement Officer CEO Alex Royce contacted the Department of Education, Environmental Protection, Shoreline Zoning Division, also known as the Department, for comment regarding the administrative appeals notice of violation issued by the town of Raymond for activities occurring on 18 Fernwood Road and 28 Whitetail Lane parcels. These parcels are in the town shoreline LR1, LR2 district. The department reviews notice of violations and submits the following comments for consideration. So it was solicited by the Code Enforcement Officer.
I guess my opinion still is the DEP was party to and did the site visit to, it may not have been this gentleman, but one of his cohorts. And part of writing up the NOVs and picking out the violations. So I don't know why we would want to silence the DEP.
Mr. Chair, if I might. This is Chris, Assistant Code Officer. Can I respond to that?
Just briefly, yes.
So briefly, the DEPs who brought this violation to our attention, it was a member of the NERPA team that visualized this and brought it to our attention. We then visited the site with Jeff Kalinich, the author of that letter, and we always work hand in hand with the Department of Environmental Protection. They're the ones that wrote Chapter 1000, our shoreline zoning rules. They assist us with these decisions. They assist us in advising us how to handle them properly. So I think it's very important that this letter be entered into the record. And it's a big part of what we do, and it's why we do it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chris, for that perspective. Fred, do you have any questions, comments to go along with this?
I think it's interesting that that they're the ones that brought it to our attention. So I think if they've got something to say under this, I think it needs to be heard and you know, brought into evidence.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion then to include this March 28th, 2022 communication from Jeffrey Kalinich from the DEP into record for consideration this evening. So I'm going to make a motion again to include. Roll call vote. Tom, yes to include or no?
I'd second and I vote
Oh,
yes.
sorry. Thank
That's
you
all
for
right.
that.
Just
Thanks.
yeah, second, and I vote to say yes.
Thank you. Greg, yes to include or no?
I'm going to vote no on this.
Okay. Fred, yes to include or no?
Yes, to include.
David Murch, I'm going to vote yes. So we have a majority vote on this, so it will be included in the record. Attorney Wagner.
Sure. I know there are some, I think the third procedural item here is if there's any motions at this time to move to continue any discussion to a future meeting. Do any parties have such a motion?
Yes.
I'd say go ahead, Attorney Brown.
Sure. Mr. Chair, I think first and foremost, I would point out while they've been decided not to be included here, the facts and circumstances of this case have changed since the last time the board took this up, and it's only been approximately 30 days. That specifically is that everyone involved continues to work towards an amicable and by agreement resolution to this case. We have submitted new applications to the town. We've updated a remediation plan, which has been submitted. And that on its own, I think, speaks to involvement and engagement by the parties to this matter. And historically, these sorts of things are best resolved by the parties and by agreement. And so I would respectively, on behalf of Duran Excavating LLC, make that request to continue so that that process can continue to move forward. The other issue, which may or may not weigh on the board's mind, is that at this point, I haven't had opportunity to review everything that may be presented this afternoon. And I will admit that I myself provided several new documents. They were relatively modest in weight. I think they spoke for themselves generally, but I do know also that Attorney Wyckoff submitted what looks to be well in excess of over 100 pages of materials. I haven't had opportunity to review those. And so I worry that there's some due process issue there, and an opportunity for the respondents here to actually review and be fully prepared. And then finally, I would make the request, in court, we'd call it judicial economy, right? It's this idea that we want to do things as efficiently and effectively as possible. We're at 7:45 now. You have 5 of these separate appeals to take up tonight. I don't think any of us, right, would be surprised if this drags on to midnight, and then we would even see then the likely need to continue this on to a second date. And it seems to me that if that's the likely trajectory of this evening, and I think it is, what is most effective for all involved and most beneficial to hearing this case is to actually set this for a special date where we can agree and take an entire day, start in the morning, so that we have enough time to hear all of this in one setting, rather than breaking it up piecemeal or going to a time when we may have less engagement or capacity to consider the things that are put before us. And so for those three reasons, I would ask that this matter be continued and that a special hearing date be set for these appeals.
So before we turn it over to the other attorneys to respond, can I just clarify, is your request to continue all 5 appeals or just those brought by Durant?
I can only speak for the ones that were brought by Durant Excavating LLC. I expect that the other parties here tonight will echo this request.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Rachel, I think you had your hand up. So I'll turn it to you if the chair is okay with that.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. Yes, I do echo that. And I will say, I was ready, willing and able to start tonight. And of course, we want to move this ball forward. I will say, as a busy attorney, I know that these documents, and as Attorney Braun said, it's well over 100 pages of documents. Myself,
Welcome to the Wednesday, April 13th, 2022 Planning Board meeting for the Town of Raymond. The Planning Board will come to order. The board does have a quorum, and we'll start with roll call. Greg, would you start?
Greg Foster.
Robert O'Neill.
Ed Kranich. Mark Child.
And Kevin.
Mike D'Arcangelo.
All right. This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all the exhibits that are presented. Please notify the chair if you are unable to see or to hear. The board works from a published agenda and will be considering tonight's items in the following order. Is anybody here for the public hearing portion for the ordinances? Okay.
Check online too.
Well, they won't matter online though, yeah. So we are going to first look at the final review plan for the Raymond Hills LLC. We'll then look at the initial plan review for a major subdivision from Brandon Chase, a request for a waiver for an extension for a subdivision, and then we'll go to the public hearing for the ordinance amendments. In each instance, the burden is upon the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the provisions of the applicable ordinances or state law. All persons speaking, including representative of the applicant and members of the public, are asked to stand at the microphone and state their name, address, and affiliation with the application. All persons speaking shall address the chair. Any conversation must be held in advance until after the board has formally adjourned. After the board votes on the merits of each application, it will prepare a written notice of decision. Because the notice of decision may substantially affect any appeals rights, and also as a matter of courtesy, the board asks that those attending the meeting with regards to a specific application not leave until the board has completed its discussion. Appeals from adverse decisions must be filed with the Superior Court or as otherwise provided by law within 45 days of this board's decision. Also, to be certain that you preserve your individual rights to file any such appeal, you must be certain that the board records evidence of your appearance this evening. All right, so our first item is the minutes from March 9th, Wednesday, March 9th meeting. Are there any changes or additions?
None here.
Nope.
I did read it.
Okay.
I move that we approve the minutes as submitted for March 9th, 2022.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And Mike says aye. Okay, unanimous, passes unanimous. All right, this folder, actually I had to break folders out to stay organized. So our next up, we don't have any old business on the agenda, so next up is is Dustin, the Raven Hills LLC. Jim, I'm not sure we need to go through the whole introduction.
No,
that
I
you
was just
normally
going to
do.
defer to Dustin to
Perfect.
respond.
Okay, Dustin, if you could just address the items that were left over.
Yeah, I think we spent quite a bit of time last time kind of going item by item down through the memos. So
Yeah, we did.
I'll just hit the,
And then those 8 additional items, I think that Jim sent you this afternoon.
I didn't see anything this afternoon.
Oh, good, okay, just checking.
Yeah, so when we left the last meeting, the kind of our punch list of items that we needed to clean up to bring back in front of you, we put together, working with Bill Kennedy and the neighbor Kristen Kish, put together an easement document for the construction of her driveway and the maintenance of the slopes and planting of some trees along that embankment there. That has been duly signed by both parties, so that is complete at this point. And we're committed to building out that driveway as part of the construction of the project. There was some questions about some large stone retaining walls that we had previously shown on the rear of a couple of the buildings. We've removed those walls completely, so we're just doing normal slope grading on the back sides of those buildings, so there won't be any need for those large walls. There was a few comments that Wayne had on the fire department side where they just wanted some additional language put into the condo docs for restriction of parking on the roadways and the enforcement capabilities of the condo association to regulate those parking rules. So we've added those. Wayne's had a chance to look at them, and he did provide an email just indicating that he was satisfied with the changes that were made. So I think from there, the last outstanding item that would have the board consider prior to discussing a final approval would be just the waiver on the number of units on the dead-end road. So that would be something we need to vote on tonight, as well as the final plan. So that's all I've got for our list. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
There was one other, Dustin, which I know you addressed, but it was on the list, which was the backup power for the septic.
Yep. So yeah, we've committed to installing a full-time on-site backup generator for the pump station. So that's included in the plans.
Okay. Has Dustin had a chance to read your proposed?
No, we did not give that to
Okay.
it's your motion, so.
Yep. So I guess also for Mr. Kennedy, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay. So this will be the proposed a waiver for the 25 lots and the 2 access points. Jim put together a nice paragraph here. So I'll make the motion that the planning board grants approval of the requested waiver of the subdivision ordinance Article 10, Section 3.6 for the allowance of the project to exceed the maximum number of lots served by a single dead-end road to exceed the limit of 24 lots. By granting the waiver, the project is allowed 1 additional lot for the development for the total of 25 dwelling units, and additionally reserves the right of the abutter Kish to have access for no more than 1 additional dwelling, or allowed use off the proposed Honey Hill Lane, subject to a separate approval by the town code enforcement officer for the Kish or successors permitted use. the planning board determines that the approval of the waiver that a second access road connection is not feasible given the parcel's land configuration and topographic constraints, and does not comprise public safety or health with the exceedance of added lots accessed off a dead-end termination versus a second road connection. So before you go on, is there a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, a second. So in discussion, Mr. Kennedy, is that, are you okay with that as far as the wording goes?
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Gee, wow.
They give Jim a cold star.
All right, is there any other discussion on the motion then for the waiver? Kevin, Mike?
I don't see any harm in either one of those.
Okay. So then, all those in favor of granting the motion? Yes, aye.
6-0.
Kevin and Mike, you got to voice the aye.
Aye.
Okay. Rules. All right, so the waiver is approved.
And you previously had waived the
1,000 foot.
The 1,000
previous
foot,
waived.
yeah.
So that's the end of the waivers. So, is there any other discussion on the project that we haven't covered yet? This has been a long one.
No, the only thing would be whatever conditions of approval you would want. We have obtained the homeowners association documents, condo documents. The only items that I would have for obviously subject to any of the conditions granted by the state of Maine, Health and Human Services for the septic design, or Maine DEP. Should be made part of the conditions. That's probably the easiest way to do that. And then the other item we had in was we'd want a third-party inspection during construction for Honey Hill Lane for groundwater conditions during construction.
Right.
Okay. That's, I think that, was that pretty much what?
Yep, yeah, that's what I had, those items there.
All right, anyone want to try the motion?
Oh, and, hold on. Wayne, did you have anything else in your, is Wayne there?
Wayne is there, but I think he's happy.
Are you all set with your stuff, or do we need any conditions on yours, Wayne?
No, the only thing I just wanted to make sure is that, that we're working off the plan submission from 4/4/22, because that includes, at least for the fire department, that includes all those items, including the street addresses.
Yeah, and what we'll do, Wayne, is, I don't know if the board's gonna sign that tonight or not, but we'll make sure that that's the appropriate date, and then we want to make sure that all the waivers granted will be on that document, on that final recorded plan as well. So we'll have another crack to look at that plan.
Then we would be good.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, didn't I read somewhere that we needed, the planning board should reference that the road section within the LR1 zone complies with the shoreline zoning requirements?
Yes, and that's part of the, I put that in with the site plan.
You put it in with?
Yeah, I put it in the site plan of the subdivision, but I did put it in there.
Okay.
So you've got, technically there's three things you can vote on. I kind of lumped the shoreline zoning into the subdivision piece, but there's shoreline zoning, site plan, and subdivision.
Shoreline zoning.
Shoreline zoning because there's a portion of the road. Then you
Right.
got site plan, and then you have subdivision.
Okay.
And you can do it all as one big lump if you want to, if you don't
Yeah.
have anything else to add, if you want to streamline it. Obviously, we'll capture it all in the conditions, I mean, in the findings of fact.
Right. All right, I'll give it a go. Okay, so I move that we approve the Raymond Hills Village 25-unit condo subdivision in accordance, we find that it meets all of the Article 7 minor subdivision Section 2 submissions and all of the Town of Raymond subdivision regulations for Article 1, and also conforms with the LRR1 zone for the portion of the road that sits within that area. conditions of approval. Jim, I missed the first one you were talking about, the DEP.
We should make conditioned upon any DEP requirements or any Department of Health and Human Services requirements.
Okay. Based upon, what conditions of approval then would be any requirements set forth by DEP or health? and-
DHHS,
What is it, H?
Department of Health and Human
Oh,
Services.
okay, what Jim said. And I think there's one other condition, isn't there? Don't we have one more?
Third-party inspection?
Yeah, third-party inspection, right? Third-party inspection, which I think we were setting up to be the Cumberland County?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. All right, I did skip asking you guys if you wanted to go through each one of these items, which, is that,
I'm good.
are you okay with that?
I'm good.
Mike, Kevin, you want to go, you all right with lumping it all together?
Yeah,
Correct.
that's good.
Okay, so is there a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Second, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, great. Justin, I guess that's it.
Very good, thank you, appreciate
Geez,
it.
that was fast, was it a couple of days worth?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're gonna miss you, Dustin.
Yeah.
well, we'll come back with some more projects.
Okay.
All right, thank you, have a good night.
Thanks, Justin. Okay, so the agenda does have the public hearing of ordinance amendments. If you are on Zoom and you do want to look at those, you can check them out at the website, or the town's website, excuse me. I'm going to skip those for now so that we can move to the Brandon Chase application, and then we will come back to that ordinance amendments. That way we'll keep you here longer than we need to. Welcome back, Will. So just for the record, Will Haskell is stepping in as our town planner. Will, welcome back.
How you doing?
Good. Did you get an answer? I know we've got your memo. Did you get an answer yet to all those questions?
So we did get a response from Mr. McSorley and Sebago Technics. We haven't re-responded. We've got a few more questions on that, but again, we're at preliminary plan level here, so we did get an initial response. And
so best way you think to proceed would that be to go through all these, or not necessarily worth?
I guess my recommendation would be to allow Mr. McSorley to give a presentation on the project.
Okay.
Since we're at preliminary plan.
Yep.
And then if he wants to during that, he can kind of address the comments that came up initially, and then at the end of that, I can give some additional feedback on several of the comments that you responded to. So.
And good, thank you, Will. I think we were at the sidewalk, right? Everybody not?
I was there, yeah.
You were there,
Yes,
you were
I
there,
was
you were
there.
there. You guys are there, right? Sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Ms. McSorley. Did I pronounce that right? McSorley?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen.
All right. And who's hosting Sandy, are you the host right now? Sandy?
She nodded.
Just switched it to Rob.
Okay.
Switched it to Rob, okay.
See if it works.
Here we go.
There we
Perfect.
go. Good evening. I'm Rob McSorley. I work for Sebago Technics. I'm here to represent the owner for the project, Brandon Chase. We're coming before you.
Rob, can I interrupt you for a second? I just want to, since it's the first time we've done this, Kevin and Mike, can you see what's on the screen?
Ken?
Okay.
Yes. Good. We're coming before you this evening for the Raymond Cape Road subdivision. This is a 37-plus acre piece of property off the Raymond Cape Road. It is in the LLR2 zone, and there is a small portion that is in the resource protection zone. You can see on the map in the lower right hand that wetland that sticks up into the property. That is in the resource protection zone. We came before you as a sketch plan on December 8th and had a site walk with you on, I believe it was January 9th. I was not there, but I know that you had it. Out of that came the consensus that we should go with a open space, a cluster open space subdivision. So that's what we have come back to you this evening with. We have done the net residential calculation. It's over there on the right-hand side of the page. And we adjusted that for the allowance for the open space subdivision, and we get 12 units allowed, and that's what's presented on the site plan. As part of this project, we're requesting 2 waiver requests. The first one is relative to open space area. In the tracks that we have that are along the southern property line and extends across the road in a big swath into the north side of the property, we have less by about an acre of open space area. The reason we think our waiver is justified is because if you look along the north property line, you'll see the back of those lots that have wetlands and wetland buffer. That's all contiguous into the dedicated open space tracts. And I believe ordinance allows the open space to be within the lot areas. The second waiver that we're requesting is the length of the road. We are longer than the 1,000 linear feet of the code. However, we have provided 2 T turnaround sections. This has been reviewed by the fire department, and they feel, I believe it's appropriate. We did receive comments from Will from Goral Palma, good job, and Mr. Wayne Jones with the Raymond Fire Department. We have responded back to those and included in that resubmission are also a copy of the hydrogeological assessment that was done for the property that we mentioned in our original submittal that we would submit prior to the final, and also financial capacity letter. The plan that you see before you is actually the modified plan that has been sent back for Will and Wayne to look at. It's the same layout, it just has more or additional information on it than the plans that you have. Included are the footprints for the subsurface field. We have sized those and placed those based upon the hydrogeological assessment. 2 of those lots will have to have additional treatment to knock the nitrates down to a base of 20 milligrams per liter versus a typical 40. We have put the well exclusion zones on there, potential well locations, the test pit locations. We've indicated, you can see them kind of shaded where the T turnarounds are, the fire lane designations, and also the additional conditions of approval that were in both Will's and Wayne's notes. Relative to the comments, they were pretty straightforward. I only have a couple that, in general, that I'd like to discuss. The first one was relative to suggested building locations and their driveway locations on the subdivision plan. We don't want to tie the site down to specific locations on the lot. What we have done there is we have given you a yellow outline of where the building can go based upon the required setbacks and the setbacks from the wetland areas. And we have also included on the plan revisions a typical driveway detail that shows a typical 15-inch culvert size which is pretty conservative based upon the flows that we would see in the swales here. What we assume is that when they come in for a building plan, they will have to do a plot plan. And at that time, they'll go out there and do an accurate location of where things should be. You know, our survey, we do it every 50 feet plus, so we don't pick up the intricals of every topo along the right of way. And that's why we want to be able to float around to the point where they come in for a building permit and they can locate that stuff on the plot plan. Another comment was relative to adding grading easements. We've added a 5-foot uniform grading easement along the back of all the roadways. That 5 foot would take the grade up above the adjacent center line grade on the road. We do not feel it's necessary to give a grading easement all the way up to the grading that's shown on this plan on the lot. It's typical on a subdivision that you're going to see grading from the swale all the way back. My lot is that way. I have the same type of slopes on my swales that are here. Any erosion that's going to occur is going to occur within the channel portion of that. But that's going to be stabilized with erosion control blanket, and then the slopes and into the property all going to be stabilized as part of the development. So we think that 5 foot grading easement is appropriate for what's been requested. Relative to the draft homeowners documents, we're expecting those any day. We were actually hoping that we had them today so that we can say we have them, but we need to review them, but we expect to have them shortly. They will include the language for the stormwater management facilities, the management of the open space areas and roadway, as well as development restrictions, you know, what people can use for siding or whatnot. You know, restrict, make sure that somebody can't have a farm on their lot or whatnot. And also the comments that have come from the fire department will include those in the HOA docs in addition. Comments 16 through 25 are all stormwater comments, pretty straightforward. We went through all those. I believe we've addressed them adequately. If I need to have additional discussion with Will, then we can do that, but I think they were pretty straightforward. Last couple comments, fire department. I think the only thing outstanding is to put the addressing on the plans. And we were asked to have Settlements Ridge Road as our street name. The fire department is okay with that, along as we start our addressing numbers in the 100 range. There are similar names on adjacent communities, and just to make sure there's no miscommunication of where they would be going, we'll start our numbers in that 100 range instead of the single number range. And then we got to do that request to the town select board to make sure that they're okay with that street name. Other than that, project is really straightforward. Comments were straightforward, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
I'm having a hard time hearing with the noise. Can somebody mute him, or?
Who's making the noise?
It looks like Chris. It looks like it's Chris, because he's the one that keeps lighting up.
I thought I was unmuted.
Okay.
I think he said his mic was unmuted, so he must have muted it.
Okay. Okay, back to you, Will.
Great. Thanks for that description. That was great. Again, I think for the most part, the response that they submitted addressed most of our comments. There's just a couple, I guess, that I'll touch on, and it's Some of them are the same ones that Rob kind of highlighted.
Excuse me. Do you want that graphic left up?
Yeah, for right now, yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So I think our comment relative to the building locations and the driveways, we had made a comment to show those, which I think you've shown the building locations on all the lots. Understand your concern about showing the driveways. I think I would like to have a discussion with you, and I don't have a list of them right now, but there are a couple lots that have some relatively, the ditch grading, the back slope grading for the ditches in a couple lots are fairly extensive and relatively steep. So I'd like to have a discussion with you about potentially showing driveway locations on several specific lots, just because it seems like they're relatively constricted in terms of where they could be located. So I think I'd like to reserve a right to at least make a comment on that. I can provide you with
Let's have a
lots
discussion.
that I think we would like to show driveway locations, and then we can have a discussion about that. I guess relative to the ditch grading, so Rob's position is that they've provided a grading easement for the back slope of the ditch that extends about 5 feet beyond the right-of-way line for the road. And while I understand his comment that a lot of that erosion, or any erosion, would normally happen within the ditch line, I guess one concern that we have is if there's erosion that happens within the ditch and then the rest of the bank decides to slough down, and someone has to go in and repair that, if there isn't an easement in there for the full back slope of the ditch, then it could be challenging for that maintenance and repair to occur in the future. I guess my question back to Rob on this issue is, for the most part, except for maybe lot, I think it's lot 1, the back slopes are basically within the front setback of the lots. So is there really an issue with providing an easement to do that future maintenance for that back slope of the ditch? So that's my comment there on that issue. There are a couple comments, I guess, in the stormwater, in our stormwater comments, or a couple responses. One was relative to, let me get the original comment here. I think it was under drain soil filter number 1, and the proximity of the outlet control structure. Our comment was the proximity of the outlet control structure to the emergency spillway or the overflow spillway. And I think the response is that the DEP refers to the pipe outlet. I guess our interpretation of that is that and we've been called out on it, which is why we made the comment, is that the outlet consists of the outlet to the pond, not necessarily the outlet of the pipe coming out of the pond, but basically the primary outlet for the pond. And our concern is when there's a trench cut for a new outlet control pipe coming out of a pond that's very close to an emergency spillway, that if that emergency spillway ever activates, the water is going to look for the easiest path through that, and if there's a trench that's been cut through there, that's the first place that spillway would tend to fail. We've seen it on a couple projects that actually have failed with a pipe relatively close, and looking at that under drain filter number 1, The outlet pipe basically runs right along the edge of that emergency spillway, so we've got a little bit of concern there, I guess, relative to that. So that was one, and then the other was relative to number 20, our original comment number 20, which talked about, I believe the 25-year storm event actually passes over the emergency spillway, and basically, I think, Rob, you referenced, we had referenced Chapter 500. There is a comment, or there is a statement in Chapter 500, Appendix 3, that basically says the principal spillway must control a maximum flow from the design storms without activating the emergency spillway. So that was the reason for our comment. So it's not typical that we would see a 25-year storm actually activate the emergency spillway. It should go through the primary spillway, and then anything over that 25-year storm event would go over the emergency spillway. So I think those were, and again, I can coordinate directly with Rob on those. We don't need to get into the weeds, but those are a few things that we're going to respond back to his original response to comments.
Okay.
Other than that, I think they did a great job in terms of responding to our original comments.
Okay, thanks, Will. Does the board have any? Actually, Rob, I think you can put us back to the normal Zoom screen, if you can hear me. Okay, thank you. Does the board have any questions going at this point? It is a preliminary review.
Yeah. Can you clarify how many building lots there are going to be? I've gotten, a few different versions of this work.
12 lots.
Just 12?
12 building lots.
Because I thought I saw something requesting a waiver to up that one. No?
No.
No.
It's open space acreage, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yep.
So I'm just a little confused about the address. Perhaps to address the issue, I don't need to belabor it. Wayne, are you okay with it? In terms of rescue fire being able to find?
So, the ultimate decision is the fire chief, and he's the E911 coordinator, and he was fine with it. One of the things that I would ask is that underneath the street sign is a number range sign for that particular street, posted on both sides, because it's an unusual starting place for numbers on a street that's starting at 100. So we did ask for that to help emergency responders understand that they're going to the right area, and that's the way it's going to be numbered.
Okay. All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
We propose to put that additional signage.
I'm sorry?
We're going to put that additional signage that's requested.
I have a question on Will, on your comment 5.
Okay.
Which is added note on subdivision plan restricting clearing on lots to a maximum of 25% of lot area. Is that 25% reduced by the wetland area that's within each individual lot?
Let me read my note here. Add a note.
That's how I took it when I read it. That's what I thought. And
Me too.
Yeah.
So can you state your question again?
So you're suggesting that a note be added to the subdivision plan restricting clearing on lots to a maximum of 25%. And my question is the wetland first subtracted from that total before and then the 25% is calculated?
Yeah, I think that should be within the building envelope. So I think the wetlands are excluded from the building envelope. We probably have to bring the plan back up, but you've excluded the wetlands from the building envelope, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the building envelope does not. There's the wetlands and the buffer.
Right.
So
So the comment was basically in the land use ordinance, there's a restriction on clearing to a maximum of 25% of the lot area, so the
Right.
building envelope,
Yeah.
or 15,000 square feet, whichever is greater.
Right.
So we just added, we asked that that note be added to the plan so that they can't, they don't go out there and all of a sudden they clear the entire building envelope.
Okay. So then for Rob, a question on the waiver that you're requesting. You're requesting it and your justification for that request is that there are wetlands in individual lots.
correct. On the plan along the north property line.
Yep.
We have that open space area that's to the north, and then you can see behind those lots is a series of wetlands and buffers.
Right.
That are connected right up to the open space track. I believe your ordinance allows the open space to be within the lots. And so I don't know if it's an issue or not, but we decided.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So in addition to that, which I'm not sure you addressed in your waiver response, Rob, we had made a note or a comment about a note being added to the subdivision plan stating that the wetland buffers and the wetlands shall not be disturbed for lot development, which you've excluded it from your lot area or your building envelope, but
We can add the note.
we ought to just have a note on that.
Yeah.
So my next follow-on question to that, Rod, is how are those wetland areas of interest that are going to be included as part of the justification for this waiver protected? So
we'll add a note that they can't be touched.
But I'm the second or third owner of lot 3 or lot 4, and I want a garden at the back of my property. How is that protected?
There's going to be homeowner documents, and those homeowner documents dictate what they can and cannot do on a property.
Okay.
And in those homeowner documents, we will also add that language relative to the fact that you cannot clear wetlands as depicted on the subdivision plan.
And will those wetland areas be delineated on the ground so that homeowner number 4 knows that there's wetlands in the back that can't be disturbed?
We can, but we have a buffer, a quite substantial buffer. I don't think they'll ever make it there, but like my lot, I have a restriction on my lot that says I can't touch the last 50 feet of my lot. And that's in my homeowner's docs, and it references the plat that my lot is at.
It should be referenced in the deed for those lots.
Yeah, well, the deed will reference
Right.
that they need to meet the homeowner documents and subdivision
It'll
plan.
reference the subdivision plan that shows it.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you, Will.
Yep.
Okay. That answers my question. Greg, do you have questions?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm completely fine with it.
Good. Kevin, you okay? Mike?
Okay.
All right. I don't think there's any problem with the 1,000-foot waiver. We've done that now. We just did it. We've done it before. As long as the fire department is comfortable with the turnarounds, I don't see that as an issue. I have a little bit of a concern with the with waiver number 2, but that's just me. I don't think the board has a concern.
I don't, which is the acreage?
Yeah.
It does, it's not a waiver to increase.
No,
lot
it is not a waiver to
reduce
increase
size or anything.
Right.
That's good.
Yep. So, and I think, and I know you're okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I'm stepping in
No.
here.
Step in. Oh, Mike.
So I apologize for not having the documents in front of me. So the waiver regarding the open space, how much land is that involving? I mean, it's not very much, is it?
Do you have the memo from Will?
I read it this morning, but I didn't print it, and I don't dare leave the screen for fear of not being able to.
1.09 acres, right?
1.09 acres. We provide 14, almost 15 acres in the open space tracts themselves. And then we have additional areas on the lot that's, I haven't calculated, but it's well in excess of an acre. And we can do the area on that and tell you what it is. But it's well in excess of an acre.
So because it isn't a great amount, I'm not too worried about it, but I agree with Bob's concerns about how do we delineate it so that the fourth buyer knows about it.
And my other concern, Mike, while you're there, my other concern on this is with the open space, the way our intent was in our open space documents was to have that area be able to be used by all individuals. With you using some of the calculation of some of the private property as now open space, that not, in my opinion, that doesn't fit the intent of our open space. I mean, I agree with the open space that it makes sense. I don't agree that we're using private property for a waiver to be able to produce another lot so that we can have, but we're going to include areas of wetlands that are not connected as open space. That's my problem.
But I believe your ordinance allows the open space area to be on the lots themselves.
Yeah, as long as they're connected.
They are.
That was but they're not. Are they?
Yeah, that whole.
Can you bring your plan back up, Ron?
Yeah.
Is he looking at this connection?
Yeah, much.
Is it just this one?
Well, these are the wetlands.
Yeah. Is he
So
just
is it-
calculating this property, or is it?
No, he's getting
Do
this
you
one.
want to
This one.
highlight
Okay.
the area that you're proposing as additional open space?
This is all open space tract, and that's open space tract.
Right.
And then you have all of this, which is connected to that open space tract.
So, okay, see, I did misunderstand this. So while you're sitting there, you are including basically all of, I mean, rough drawing, but all of this area here
Correct.
as open space.
That's not in our calculation. We've only included the lot area.
Right, understood.
Yep.
That's why I'm saying that equals well more than an acre.
But your point, Bob, is technically that's on other people's lots.
Right.
So that you can't trespass on their lots.
Exactly.
If you want to use that open space for going to walk through it or whatever.
Right. So that is really our intent for the open space.
Yeah, I would have to agree that's a concern.
Once again, I think we need to check the ordinance. The ordinance, I believe, says that they can be on open space or on lot. If necessary, we can provide an easement that allows people through that area.
That would work.
Okay?
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Bob. What's up, sir?
We have to get Ron before we put me back as host.
Oh,
Whoop.
Thank you.
Sorry to see you now.
so this project is coming to us as a skip plan. It's now coming to us for preliminary approval. So I don't know if there.
Did you go to public hearing at preliminary?
Well, that was my next question. Is I don't think we've advertised this as a public hearing. Right, did we advertise this as a public hearing tonight?
I don't believe so. Let me look. No, we did.
We didn't. Yeah, I didn't think we did.
No.
Is it a public hearing? We've got really lawyer verbiage comments on this. We accept public comment, but we have to have a public hearing advertised. I think what it said was public comments, but not public hearing. I mean, I could be wrong because I didn't see the advertisement, but I think that's what it was.
I think it did say public hearing.
I'm more than willing to take a public comment now, but we can't make any official action on the project until we have a public hearing. And the public hearing has to be advertised, and it has not yet been advertised. But if you'd like to say something, sure. I don't, unless the board has some objection, I don't see any reason why you can't.
No objection. No objection.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, that was a public hearing for ordinance amendments. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it was. That
Right.
wasn't a.
Okay. Yes, please.
So maybe the Wyndham Eagle advertisement was a little odd. My name is James Glazer. I'm a resident of 30 Cape Road, so relatively close to the proximity of this. Found the report very comprehensive. Did have a question quickly for the planning board. What is the minimum time frame that preliminary or even secondary reports are provided to the residents for review? Is there a requirement for how long those reports are available? 7 days before, 2 days before, anything like that, posted to the website? I was just curious. I didn't get a hold of this until 72 hours prior. It seemed like short notice. 14 days. Yeah, it wasn't posted 14 days prior. My question is related to the trip generation assessment. It is fairly known publicly to my interaction with third-party suppliers and a 14-year resident of 30 Cape Road that Cape Road has a significant speed issue and a traffic issue on that road. I have been witness to several near misses, animal fatalities, and my concern is that by adding these additional lots and the traffic calculation of approximately 30 trips or egresses to the day would increase the severity and risk of a traffic incident. So my encouragement to the planning committee and to the selectmen board would be to reconsider improved signage and traffic control in that area. So this is the area where it steps down. It's actually 35 to 25. The report says 40. That's not correct. Is a significant problem and gets exaggerated significantly in the summer. Well, obviously with the incoming vacationers, people are traveling on an average of 45 to 55 miles per hour through that zone. And I personally, as a resident, experience near misses on a weekly basis. So when you concentrate, that's one resident coming out of a single driveway. When you concentrate a number of residents coming out of a street now into that special zone where people are supposed to be stepping down, but they're not, you're only going to increase the risk area. So just something to consider and take very seriously from the experience I've had over 14 years in that area.
So what would you suggest?
I know there's been, I can't confirm whether it's been formal or informal. I know residents of Murch Landing and other areas or other residents along Cape Road like myself have requested the consideration of speed tables. And quote, again, possibly informal, I can't confirm that. The response has been not a chance. I don't know if there are a number of effective signage that are permanent in several different towns within Raymond saying here's your speed coming into a zone that kind of publicize to people and bring awareness to slow down. There is minimal signage in the area now, so I would suggest prior to this traffic coming onto this street as they're exiting Cape, improve signage, various different ways to slice and dice that would bring people's attention to slow down, that you have traffic entering, whether it be speed or flashing lights if you're over. I've seen some very effective things through Poland and in Gray where if your speed is over the limit, it starts flashing and telling you to slow down. And those towns have said that has been effective in lowering the call it lack of abiding to the speed zone. Right. So because this report was based on those speed zones and how much clearance is needed and line of sight. And when I know that those speed zones are not being adhered to by the residents, that's why I want to call that into consideration. It's fairly inexpensive mitigation at the end of the day.
Yep.
That was all my comments.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I missed your name.
James Glazer,
James.
Glaser.
Thanks, James.
My name is George Mata. I live on the Cape Road as well. I'm also in a butter to the property that is being considered for a subdivision. We have a common boundary of approximately, I would say it's around 500-600 feet along the north boundary. So you see the map here, somewhere from about here to here. This is our property here. And a few questions. A couple of things here. The first one in the exhibit, I was reading through this here quickly, got to look at it this afternoon. And I don't know, on the website, you've got page numbers, and you don't have that here. However, in one question I have, probably for you, Mr. McSorley, is on, this would be the Appendix 4, Subsurface Investigations. You show a map, I think that's it, where it's kind of a before and after. I'm sorry, it's 2 or 3, it's Appendix 6, Stormwater Management Plans. You show a map which includes our property that we own. It has a drainage area, stormwater area here, and you show a number of different, that's the current situation. The next page shows the proposed situation, where you're changing, according to this map, the drainage on our property by what you're doing on your property. It's the only thing I can assume, because it's a different map. One is before, one is after the project. So I'd like to know why our property has a drainage change. Maybe it's just a typo and wasn't put together correctly in the office. I know those things are done with just using the contour maps, but there's a question I have there that could be looked at. The other one question I have involves the wetlands along the north boundary of this project. These particular, these here, these large ones, these two large ones here, I don't know about these. This lot comes up to about here, so I haven't really looked at those here. But I am familiar with these, very familiar with them, obviously. We know the property pretty well. And the concern with those is that they could potentially be governed by the Natural Resource Protection Act as either a vernal pool or a significant vernal pool. And if that's the case, then that needs to be investigated. We don't know for sure if they are or not. And you have a letter here in your packet. It's around page 114. It's from the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. A Becca Settle, wildlife biologist. And in it you highlighted, our department has not mapped any essential habitats that would be directly affected by your project. That's true. I'm very familiar with that. And I noticed that if you continue to read down through, you'll see where that's common throughout the whole state, and she talks about that. And she does recommend strongly, in my opinion, the way it's written, significant vernal pools. We recommend that surveys for vernal pools be conducted within the project boundary by qualified wetland scientists, and it goes on. These surveys should extend up to 250 feet beyond the anticipated project footprint because of the potential performance. So I notice on the layout that you currently have, some of the holes that were dug and the footprints for buildings and foundations could be within 250 feet. I don't know that for sure. But right now you're talking about 125 feet here. 250 is going to take you out quite a bit further than that. And you are allowed some development within that. We all know that. The law allows some development in there. The concern I have is if we just talk gardens a little while ago. I believe both of these are vernal pools, and don't want to see insecticides or fertilizer or anything else from a garden or a lawn running off into them. So the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife is recommending that a survey be taken, and the window for that survey is now. They do it twice, and they gotta do it now, or you wait another year if you decide that that should be looked at as a planning board. So that's the thing that I'd like to see addressed, and those are my bulk of my comments, I believe. Let's see. Yep.
Okay.
Questions?
Yeah, what, sir, it's a mask only for the meeting.
Oh, sorry. I
It's
didn't
okay.
realize. I've been here this whole time. I didn't mean to.
I didn't notice you before, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I'll see if I can find one.
There's one right here.
Yep.
And that's another thing, I could not find this on the website. You've got the entire plan on there, but this map's not on that website or any of the appendices.
That colored version.
I didn't see any version of it. I saw one that showed a road going through the middle and had to do with stormwater, but it didn't show lots. Anyway, maybe it's somewhere else on the website and I couldn't find it.
Ms. Bond, first thing, I could not, as you were going through it, your first comment concerning the runoff, that what you were referencing, I just want to make sure, I couldn't find what you, in the packet, what you were referring to.
Okay.
I just want to make sure somebody did catch it.
I'll address that.
You'll address that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Will, did you catch actually where it is? That
I know, I'll look at it, I know what you was.
Okay.
On the website, it's
right.
around page 10. Yep, that's the one.
Okay.
114 or somewhere in that neighborhood? No, 104, 102 and 103, I think it is.
Okay. And for to address the vernal pool issue, when we did the site walk, we were told that they were in fact going to test for vernal pools, but they couldn't do it because we did it in the winter. So I'm assuming that maybe that's the wrong assumption, but I'm assuming that is already going to take place. Is that correct, Rob?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the only reason I brought it up is because there's a note in here that tends to imply that's not going to happen, that they're not vernal pools and they weren't found on the state maps.
Significant.
Right. None were found on the state map, but they actually come down and look. And that's what we were told.
Well, it's more than a look. It's.
Oh, I understand, but
yeah,
it's the difference.
Right.
Okay. Are there questions? Okay.
Anyway, I guess the only thing I'd close with, I'm not against the development. I just want to make sure that, we've lived there 17 years and I've been watching these and others in the area for some time, and I'm pretty convinced that there's some organisms and animals in there that need to be looked after. So.
Indicator species.
Okay.
Wow, look at you.
I know that stuff.
It's like you're dummy too.
You want me to address?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. The two maps that he's referring to are the pre and post stormwater maps.
Rob, can you tell us where those are in your book?
I'm not sure, they should be in the storm, at the tail end of the stormwater section.
That's what I would have thought, but maybe I just missed it.
Or, if you look at your bank plans, they're the last 2 pages.
You've got the plan set for the last 2 pages of the plan.
That'll be easier.
Yeah.
Appendix 6.
Appendix 6, yeah.
If you look, those are the big versions.
Okay.
And so what we do is, when we do our stormwater, we have to model or take into consideration any water that comes onto our site. And if you look at that map, you'll see that there are lines that extend all off our property. And that's what those lines are. They go, I believe, into the gentleman's property there. Both plans, they're exactly the same for the boundary outside the property. They change within the property. So, the
Rob,
one...
Can you explain why the time of concentration changes from pre to post off the property? So the time of concentration line that you show, which is pretty specific.
Well, based upon you changing the development of the site, then your time of concentration line will change.
But off the property, the time of concentration is different in pre versus post.
But once again, you're looking for the longest time of concentration. It doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna be in the same place after you develop. So, your time of concentration, the place where your furthest point of water hits that area is where you take your time of concentration starting from. And then what you do is you look at your site after, you redraw your stormwater boundary, and you relook at all those areas, and you look and find the place where that new basin, it's the farthest travel time for that piece or drop of water to flow through that boundary. So when you adjust the boundary, then your time of concentration line most likely is going to change also. It's not necessarily going to be in the same place.
But the off-site boundary area, though, is identical in the pre-versus
Yes.
post.
Yeah.
But this line, maybe I'm missing it, the line where you have A, B, C, D, that's where the line we're referring to, right?
Yeah, that's the time of concentration line.
Okay.
And that can change.
Well, how can that change off the property when you develop on the property?
What you're looking for is you're looking for the longest travel path of a drop of water. So if I have this
I see.
if I have this big area here, right?
Yep.
And then I cut it down to this. It's not necessarily the furthest part.
Right,
It's going
I
to be the
understand.
same location.
That's what I was trying to get you to say.
Right. So I think then the answer to, I think, your question is, the water runoff of, was it Mr. Bada? Is that?
That's right.
Mr. Bada property is not going to change
No,
post-development?
no.
Okay.
And
But
that drains, that one wetland drains onto the property.
right.
And we actually have a pipe that goes underneath the roadway to convey that and continue that flow through the property.
Okay.
So,
Good. Well, you're gonna have
so
to.
I'm concerned because, so are we saying that first of all, on your map?
That's why they're gonna yell at you if you don't go to the map. You know, the voice comes out of the sky and.
So if you look at the map,
Could you use the microphone, please?
if you look at the map, the way I see this is happening somewhere right in this area right here. Yeah, right about there, right there. So that's an area that you've taken out. You're saying that's going to be a protected area or open space, or so that's taken out. So I'm still struggling to understand why before anything was done here, the water moves right along the boundary here.
It moves,
And it doesn't show that on your map.
it generally flows this way.
It's not showing that on your map.
We don't put an arrow for every drop of water. What we do is, that is the longest path for the water to flow. But what we're saying is all of that area drains this way. On this map, there's what's called a study point, and that's where the water ends up.
Okay.
So if you look at this map, you
It's
don't
down
have the
here.
whole map.
Yeah.
Right down here, you'll see it on
Right.
the dot.
Yeah.
And that's the study point, and that's where all the water flows to.
So I guess the question is then if that's the case, then after the fact, why isn't it shown as being the case now at the current?
It is.
Because it is. I think.
There's no arrow on the first map.
But it doesn't. So I think.
It's not coming out of here though. On this one, it's coming out of there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the answer is that after, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but after what this point of concentration is looking at the longest line that can be drawn for that flow of water.
It's
right.
It's not the line.
It's not the.
It's actually the flow path.
Okay, so the longest possible flow path.
Yeah.
So once the development gets put into place, that flow path extends into the development now further than it would have before, which changes that the longest point and pulls it into the property. So the water flow doesn't change. The way the water's moving doesn't change. It's just where the concentration of that water for the longest stretch of time changes.
So are you saying that the water's gonna back up onto the property?
No.
It should be the same as
It's exactly
pre
the
and
same.
post.
Yeah.
And you can tell really by the contour lines, that the small lines, it's unusual to have a map with these arrows and showing the path of concentration, but from what's on here, it doesn't appear anything changes on your side.
Other than the additional ABC line that they added on the second.
That's something
Yeah,
very
there's two
specific to
different
the
lines, there's a
model.
pre-line and a post line.
Well, I understand that. That's why my question came up in the first place, because
But it has nothing to do with the amount of water that falls there and where it goes.
Yeah, it was a good question. I
Just
think we all learned
the
something, but.
What?
I said it was a good question. I think we all learned something, but it doesn't really affect the way the water's flowing. It just affects that concentration point of the longest flow of water.
Okay, so a follow-up question.
Yep.
We have no plans to do this now, but let's just say my son inherits this and he wants to put a 3 or 4 houses up there, development of some kind. Is this new line that you put on here showing this drainage that is happening after this development goes in going to impact any decision this board makes on the
No.
future of that? And he might propose 10 years from now.
No impact at all.
Okay.
And what will happen on that case is any development that happens in this area will still go that way. He'll be restricted to what the runoff can be from that area. These other areas, if he's developing that, that's gonna head out that way, and I think this is gonna head down this way. But it won't affect the amount of, discharge that he could have pre or post. Doesn't affect it at all.
Okay. I'm not sure I totally understand it, but thank you for the explanation.
You're welcome.
If you have a second after the meeting, I'll. The second comment relative to vernal pools, we in fact took this into account when we proposed this design. You'll notice that there are no wetland impacts. That was specific, so that we did not have to go to Maine Department of Environmental Protection or Army Corps relative to wetland impacts. Not only that, when we looked at it, we actually calculated if these were vernal pools, how much impact area would be within that 250-foot radius to make sure that we were below 25%. And that's what we are. Okay. So we took that into account in our design to make sure that we didn't have a problem with these wetlands, either one of impacting them or impacting any vernal pool habitat that would be adjacent to them.
But you are assuming them all to be vernal pools, is what you're saying?
That's the assumption we've looked at.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
The delineation of those wetlands that you're showing on there, was that done in the field or is that from a map, a state map?
In the field. Yeah.
In the field?
Gary Fullerton of our office, who's a
Wetland specialist.
certified wetland specialist. Yeah.
Did you submit the report for
Did you
that?
come to Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on the survey. It's noted on there and probably on the subdivision plan too.
All right. In the project that we just looked at, the same concerns came up on the driving and the roads and speeds. And although I'm sure everybody on this board and everyone that drives around here shares those concerns, but there's nothing that we can do as far as a project approval goes based upon how people drive. We can only really look at site distance based upon how people should be driving, and that's a concern. I think that we can work or ask if some signage would be appropriate for the intersection, but there's nothing that can be required because it doesn't meet the ordinance site distances.
Understood.
Did I say that right? Good. Keep saying it wrong. What else? So how would the board like move forward with the preliminary table till we get our additional information? What do you want to do?
That's where I am. Yep, I think so.
Preliminary? Go. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to let somebody else have the fun of doing this going through the motion here. It's an easy one. Nobody wants to do it? All right, I move that we grant preliminary approval to the major subdivision applicant Brandon Chase, location map 004, lot 029, zone LLR1, pending public hearing and completion of outstanding items.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Everybody okay? Kevin, you okay? I haven't heard from you. You all right? Okay. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Zoom guys? Okay. Pass.
Thank you very much.
The next item is are you also going to do this Valley View subdivision request for extension? Who's doing?
John Chase.
John Chase is doing that. Oh.
That's very simple.
Well, the letter that I read just said maximum extension. It didn't really give a date of anything at the time. Are you back representing? Are you back guiding us here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This was one that was done by, I think Walsh Engineering.
Okay, thank you, Will.
And we had discussed this with, wasn't with Sean, it was another gentleman in his office we had discussed this with to give them, we just told they had to come back to the board, but I'll look it up while you're having a discussion. What the actual terms are as far as what we can extend it to. I know, Alex, you might remember as well. No? Thanks, Alex.
Yes.
I think Jim might remember.
Yeah,
Valley Road, isn't it?
Yeah.
yeah.
Didn't we extend this? Did we do
I
that?
think we did.
No, they came back for reapproval.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
It's never been extended, but they did come back for reapproval because they altered the road design.
Right.
And we had to relook at what they re-altered, so it has not technically come back for extension, but I'll try to find that language in here. What the terms are as far as.
Did we just revise that last year?
We did, and it matches the site plan, so it's all the same. Here it is. See if I can keep my glasses. It's in Article 10, section. Yeah, right. Article 10. Which section is it in?
I think it's isn't Article 11(6).
I'm looking at, yeah, I'm in site plan because it's the same language.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, the language reads,
Look at it.
a property owner, developer, or their agent may request an extension of the period to commence or complete construction by submitting a request to the reviewing authority that issued the subdivision plan approval prior to the expiration of the initial term of approval. The reviewing authority may grant one-time extension up to 2 years to commence or complete construction. If construction is not completed, if construction is not commenced or completed within the approval timeframe, the applicant must reapply. So it's for 2 years.
2 years.
And I think, Alex, you wanted to come back to the board because it was a subdivision that, so you have the authority to grant an extension of 2 years. And they did submit that prior to the expiration of their last approval, correct?
Yeah.
I know John's on here. John, did you want to say anything?
No, I appreciate it. Thank the board for at least taking a look at this. Obviously, we're all in difficult times here with time management and things like that. It is it is a project that I'm gonna be putting on the books here for, 2022, late, 2023 starting time. I'll be back in front of the board. I've just gotta complete, I've got several projects I'm doing right now, and this is the next slated up project that we're looking up to do. So I'll get started within the next 2 years quite easily.
If we give him an extension, he doesn't have to come back again, right?
No, if you did, the board has the authority, the board or the staff has the authority to grant an extension, which would be for 2 years, so it would go on to the original approval date expiration, so we just extend it 2 years. So essentially it's very easy. You can just make a motion to extend for 2 years due to circumstances of the economy or whatever. I would just make a recommendation that whatever the reason is, you just note it in your extension if that's where you want to go.
So by definition, is it 2 years of commencement or completion? Because the verbiage is kind of confusing. It's just two different, it's because if it's completion, then it could be
you have to commence.
4 year.
You have to commence.
Which is 2 years.
Yeah. It's commence, and then I think we do have a separate, once they commence, then they have a period that they have to complete within. But this is to commence.
Yep. Okay, I'll make a motion that we grant a 2-year one-time extension for the commencement on this project based upon recent conditions, both with COVID, the economy, and things that were obviously wouldn't have been anticipated.
I'll second.
For discussion, do we have to have a reason in there?
No, but I think it's just good that you just don't do it blindly. I think there should be a reason, a rationale, and I think it's, if it's COVID or the economy or the builder's scheduling issues, I think that's fine.
Okay.
I just think it just clarifies why.
Because we have a project before us from Brandon Chase.
Different Chase.
Different Chase, perfect, okay.
That's John Chase, Chase Home Excavation. This happens to be Brandon Chase, a different developer. 2 chases in the same time. We're chasing our tail.
All right. All any discussion, questions?
All good.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
6-0. Congratulations, you got a 2-year extension.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Thanks.
Good night.
Have a good night.
You as well.
Okay.
So Rob's picture's gonna stay up there now.
All right, so our next order of business is the public hearing for the amendment changes. So if you are still out there watching on Zoom, you can feel free to call in as we go through this. Just as if you are watching for info, once the planning board takes action on the individual ordinances, they are forwarded to the selectmen. The selectmen then review and approve or disapprove and send it on to the town meeting, where the town has the opportunity to vote to approve or not approve any of these ordinance changes. For the board, we have an option. We can either approve and forward with recommending approval to the Board of Selectmen. We can approve without a recommendation, or we can table for further study, or we can just vote no, and then the ordinance changes would stop here. I don't think we need to go through every one of these as detailed as we had, but just for the record, I intend to read the summary that the change is we are proposing, and then have a vote whichever way we feel appropriate. Does that sound all right with everybody? All right. So our first one is 22 tax 01. And the summary of the change is this amendment to the land use ordinance ensures zoning provisions would require all applicants for a setback variance to meet the hardship requirements of a variance. The much more forgiving setback reduction option would be removed from both ordinances. The setback variance with less strict hardship criteria would replace the setback reduction in the shoreline zoning provisions. This less strict variance already exists in the land use ordinance. Is there a motion? Do you want me to do this?
Yep, move to accept
What do you want to call it?
Good question. We're gonna call it,
Revision?
revisions to
Zoning.
Article 6, Bravo 1B. No, that doesn't sound right. No, it would be shoreline zoning provision, section 16G2.
Yes, that.
That, second.
I think if you just go to the cover sheet, I think that will help you.
Yeah. I agree.
That really has all the nuts and bolts I think you need.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Perfect, passes. Second one, 22.
Excuse me, Bob, can you just give me who seconded that one?
I did.
You did. Yeah, Bob did.
I did.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry.
And are you gonna, I assume there's no public comment? I don't see any come in.
No.
Just make sure we don't forget to ask.
No, they get one chance.
Okay.
That's it. You know?
One and done.
Well, they get another chance at the town meeting.
That's true.
And at the selectmen.
And select board.
Yep.
All right, 22 Tech 02 is the summary of change is the amendment of the land use ordinance and zone and shoreline zoning provisions would create specific performance standards for the solar energy systems. This, just for the record, this is really our only ordinance that is actually a brand new section to the land use ordinance.
That is correct.
Is that correct? Okay. Is there a motion?
I move to forward it to the select board with recommendation to approve.
I'll second. And actually, we missed that on the first. Sandy, we missed this on the first one. So we just need to modify the motion for the first ordinance change to be recommending to the selectmen, recommending approval. And just to be,
Gotcha.
okay, and that was the amendment to Greg's. I second that amendment, and we just need another vote to make sure we're all legal.
This is for the first one.
All those in favor? Okay. Sorry, guys.
So
All
you
right.
need to make
That's
the
my
motion for the
fault.
second one.
Second, so we are in discussion now for the second one.
Yep.
Shore ordinance. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Done, passed. 2203, summary of change, Article 9, Section A3 indicates that the conditional use being applied for will not generate noise, vibrations, fumes, odors, dust, or glare, which are detectable at the lot boundaries, and all aspects of the conditional use will be carried on within the structure. The conditional use of the outdoor sales and service found in Article 4, Section Foxtrot 3, for the commercial district does not have a definition in the ordinance. The proposed amendment will define outdoor sales and service and update the ordinance to allow conditional use outside of the structure. Motion?
I move we recommend approval to the Board of Selectmen.
Already recommending approval, I'll second. Any
I'll
discussion?
second. Oh, you second.
I did. You guys are too slow.
We are.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes. 22-4. Summary of a change. This amendment to the subdivision regulation would correct an error in the ordinance that creates confusion as to which subsection a 25-unit subdivision would need to adhere to. Did I read that correctly? This amendment to the subdivision regulation would correct an error in the ordinance that creates confusion as to which subsection, a 25-unit subdivision would need to adhere to. Is there a motion?
I motion we forward it to the Board of Selectmen, recommending approval.
Over.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Done. 22 Tech 5. Summary of change. This proposed amendment would allow newly defined use commercial solar energy systems and outdoor storage within certain districts in town. What am I doing? 25, 26. Wait a minute.
The last one you just read was
Okay,
2205.
okay, the 6. Thank you. Is there a motion? adding is permission to the solar energy system use in certain districts. I move that we approve the amendment and forward recommending approval. Ed, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Done. 22 text 7, summary of change. The amendment would define the term outdoor storage. Approval of this amendment does not allow the use in any district. See 2206. Is that, Alex, what is 2206?
That's the table of land uses in shoreline zoning where we're adding solar systems to the table.
Yep.
Is there a motion?
I move that we forward it to the Board of Selectmen with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. 22.8, summary of change. This amendment would change the minimum lot size requirement to 2,000 square feet instead of the current 21,780 square feet, which is 1/2 acre. Basically, just correcting two different verbiages in the ordinance. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve this or recommend it for approval to the Board of Selectmen.
Second? Beat you.
Yeah, you did.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now, this one, have we, this one I found in the back, the business license ordinance. Did we work on this one? And I just...
No, you don't. This is not part of the land use ordinance. It's a standalone ordinance. And it's not something that you guys are required to really look at. But it's been common practice. I think this ordinance was actually created in 2020. Common practice to have you guys at least look at it. And you know, have it be included in the public hearing process. But it's really more of a select board ordinance.
Yeah. So, for the board, my recommendation on this one, if we're comfortable with it, we would vote to approve and send without recommendation, because it's not really one of ours.
Okay.
Okay. The purpose, I'll just read the purpose then. The purpose of the ordinance is to provide reasonable regulations for business other than home occupants operating in the town of Raymond, and to protect and promote the health, welfare, and safety of town residents and the general public. So I would move that we approve the proposed town of Raymond business license ordinance and send to the selectmen without a recommendation.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. It's all done. Last chance in the public hearing. Closed. There was nothing really in there to get anyone excited.
Yeah, nope, nothing at all.
All right.
Next year.
Yeah, we'll go for next year. All right, gender. What else have we got?
There's supposed to be an interview with Michael Rich.
Oh yeah, did Mike show up at all?
May have been here earlier.
He has not come into the Zoom now.
Okay.
Do you want to schedule him for next month?
Yes, I guess we probably should, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay,
Next month.
will do.
Plan of communications?
I didn't even talk this over with Alec, but one of the things I think you probably have all heard recently in the news is the discussion that's going on in the state legislature with regards to affordable housing and changes to lot density. I did get something from Maine Municipal Association, which I can share with Alex, which is their latest recommendations to that. But obviously there's a lot of density and a lot of concerns from a lot of communities about the approach that's being taken on this, and some concerns. I know various folks and members of MMA have responded, and it's now going to the Senate. So it'll be interesting to see where that discussion goes, because it's usually different at the Senate level than it is at the legislative level. But there are a lot of concerns from various towns and municipalities about the density and the impacts and some of the language that's in there. And if you want, I can send it to Alex, and I can send it around so you can see the most current version of that.
Okay.
I don't think that'd be something that we would have to implement until 2023, because when we do our ordinances. But it would be a pretty big shakeup as far as density going from, you know, basically one dwelling on a lot to 4.
On every lot?
On any single family lot, if you're doing affordable housing, you can get up to 4 units.
Regardless of the district?
Yeah, there's some language in there about certain districts they want to do it in. This is the discussion that's going on. There's discussions about water usage, sewer usage, the density of that. The language that I saw was really, you could tell it was geared towards communities that had municipal sewer, because obviously on some of our lots it might be difficult to attain the necessary sewer flow rates. The other issue that comes up a lot too is parking, and they give a substantial reduction for required parking in this proposal, which some of the towns are also having issues with, because I think we see too, where we have multi-unit dwellings, there's not enough parking usually in those things, and if you don't have enough parking, they park on the street or they park on the lawns, and it, you know, becomes an issue. So there's a whole bunch of things in there. I will pass it on to Alex so that he can pass it on to you folks to take a look at it. At this point, I don't think there's anything we need to do, but you know, if you do have comments, obviously we can pass them along to MMA or whatever. But I can tell you, there's a lot of boards that are interested in what's going on with this.
Okay.
It has could have a drastic change on some of the communities it works in. But the question I always have with affordable housing is, to me, to your point, some of it's got to be contained in the zoning where we put these types of units, because they should be near the town center where there are available services. And I think in some of the rural communities, you have to ask yourself, you know, how much affordable housing you're going to get, because typically those are closer to municipal centers where work and services are located. And the further out they get, now you got the expense of transportation. We don't have a busing transportation program here in Raymond that connects us with other communities. So there are challenges, but to your point, I know the board's discussed this before. You know, do we need to look at our affordable housing? And the state's taking it kind of out of our hands at this point.
Okay.
So. Alex, you have any thoughts on that?
Not really. I think I need to learn a little bit more about it. I would be interested to see how we might be able to work that in.
Yeah, I think the way they wanted to look at it is kind of like the way we would with a multiplex. The same type of density we would with a multiplex. And I think that's what they're looking at, is duplexes and multiplexes for the most part. Not 4 single families on a lot, but basically 4 dwellings in a multiplex.
Yeah.
I'm going to build 3 more houses in my backyard.
And they're also looking at softening some of the accessory dwelling unit language as well.
Okay. Project on the for next week. Sandy, are all those projects coming to us next week? Next month? Excuse me.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, so have you?
I have not seen those yet.
You've not seen them.
Right, I'll get them out probably on Tuesday.
Do we have a summary of what those projects will be?
So the question, Sandy, really have, is it doable in a meeting, this pile that's being sitting on your desk?
Well, it's going to be interesting.
That doesn't sound good.
You should be a politician.
Anytime you have a couple of things, but that one with the piers and docks.
Yes, okay.
Under that section, that one's going to take some doing, but that relates back to stuff that's going on in Board of Appeals right now for administrative appeals, because Alex did his job and issued notices of violation.
It's an after the fact.
Right.
Yeah.
That's going to be interesting.
That's going to be interesting. So.
Okay, let's not talk about it.
What else are the other ones?
One is an amendment to an approved subdivision to move a property line because she's buying part of the neighbor's lot because her well and septic are already on it.
Okay. Simple. Should be.
Somebody wants to come in for an informational meeting to try to get something changed from a plan from way back, so that can be subdivided, even though the original plan said it couldn't be any further divided.
Egypt Road one.
And yeah, then there's the Egypt Road one, I think, is the lot line change.
So Bob, what we can do is Alex and I can kind of meet, and then we can kind of reach out to you, discuss what we'll have to, how we want to program the meeting, or how we want to space time the meeting, just to make sure we have ample time.
Right. Okay. Anybody else have
And
any?
we've got the other one too, Jim, from Sebago Technics, that isn't even coming to me what it is at the moment. Oh, the
Moraine,
Harbor.
Moraine, yeah.
Yeah, that was the other one.
What was that? You both talked over each other?
Port Harbor
I said
Marine?
that was
Oh,
the other one.
Port Harbor Marine,
Yeah,
okay.
Port Harbor Marine.
Yeah.
All right. We got some shoreline zoning stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Always.
All right, anything else that we need to talk about?
I don't think so. We have no
Adjournment?
site walks or anything, so.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Done. Thank you, guys.
Good evening. This is the organizational meeting for the Budget Finance Committee. I'm going to call this meeting to order. First off, we'll start with nominations for chairman. Do I have any nominations?
I nominate Bob.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? I need a motion to close nominations for chairman.
I move nomination cease.
All those in favor of Bob Goslin, raise your hand. I can't see Bob Jones, but thank you. Next order of business is to approve the minutes of the April 27th, 2021 meeting. Again?
Bob, did you want to elect a vice chair?
Oh, yes, sorry. Any nominations for vice chair? Any nomination for vice chair? Vice chair will sit in the place of the chair if he is not available.
If you're not available and we don't have any other members, Bob, we won't have a meeting.
We're having possibly two approved next week at the select board meeting. Bob Jones, you see on the screen, is one of them.
Diana Pickavet May.
Pickavet as well.
Mhm.
So, any nominations for vice chair? I'd like to nominate Dennis Morse.
This is all new to me, Bob.
You're the reason why I'm here.
Yeah.
Will you accept the nomination?
Sure.
Any other nominations? Motion to close nominations.
I move nomination cease.
Thank you. All those in favor of Dennis? Any opposed? Thank you, Dennis.
Okay.
Next, I'll need from our members from last year, a motion to approve the minutes of the April 27th meeting. That was our last budget meeting prior to the town meeting.
I move acceptance of the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you. And I will second that. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Just so you understand how the process works, tonight we'll have a hearing of sorts and the presentation of the budget. After this meeting, after other findings meeting, any questions you have need to be funneled through the chair. So that there won't be 5 different people asking the same question. Try to consolidate the questioning, and I'll run up that to where it needs to be, and then I'll collect the lead to the team, send out a message on the findings. So again, don't self-communicate with members of either the town hall or select board. Come to me first, and I will funnel it to where it needs to go. Are there any questions?
I have one, and that is when we just voted to accept the minutes of the last meeting, they're not in this budget committee report, this budget report, right?
No, they were sent as an attachment.
Oh, okay, I'll have to go back. And I'm working with 2 different emails now, and some of it's going to junk, so I'll check it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue, Abigail asked about a town email address.
Yes, I have sent a note to Kevin Woodbury, our tech, and he is in the process of trying to do that for all committee members. So as soon as we have one, I'll get it sent out to you. Because it is preferable to use town email for freedom of access requests. We don't want to go after your personal email if we don't have to. We also don't get a lot of requests, but you just never know.
Any other notes? Any other comments? Tonight we will be getting back together at 6:30, where we will have the findings meeting. And we'll have Don open it up with a brief overview. And then
I think we're gonna open with Sharice, I think, talking a little bit about the restructuring of the budget, and then Don, but I can introduce that if you'd like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any other comment from the Budget Finance Committee?
Can I just ask like some basic, I've never done this before questions?
Okay.
So we're gonna have this next meeting. At that meeting, we're gonna like review what was in the budget book.
That's correct.
And then do we ask questions that we have during that meeting, or like what is the format of what happens in that? And then do we just basically go through like multiple meetings of doing that until we've gone through the whole binder?
That's correct. It should take 2 meetings to go through all our department heads and provider agencies. And then we'll have a workshop with the select board to kind of talk about these items, hotspots, areas of concern, so that, when it comes time to make a vote, we'll have everything we have in our pocket.
And on a really high level, now you'll have the department heads right there where you can ask some questions about what you've seen in the book. And that's the next 2 meetings. And like Bob said, there's a workshop. After that, the select board will put together the town warrant for that will be voted upon. And once they've made their recommendations, you'll get together again, go over the warrant and make your recommendations, whether you think things should be, as the select board say, or less.
Thank you.
So feel free to ask any questions to presenters this evening. And so that we don't wait to have to communicate by email. But feel free to
How
ask your
detailed can those questions be? Like, I just don't want to be like the odd kid out asking like super detailed questions or like super dumb questions. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yep. You'll learn as we go along. So don't. You can ask whatever questions you want tonight. So.
Well, that brings another question up then. Is there a time, do they set a timetable on these meetings? I know when select board used to meet with us about our cover letter or our whatever, you know, PowerPoint presentation, there would be a timetable. In other words, is it our meetings? Is it a 6:30 to 7:30 meeting, Bob, or is it? Do we pick halfway through the budget, and the chair of the select board decides the length of the meeting? How does that timetable work? Because like Abigail, you know me long enough. I have 50 questions for every one answer. So I'm trying really hard to come in here and be quiet, but the reality is there's a lot of questions that are involved with running the town in the budget process, especially if there's only 3 meetings. Is there a timetable? Do they?
No,
actually
there
set-
is, there is no time limitation. I suppose if somebody started going on, it is the chair's prerogative to say, no, I think we've killed that horse. But that very rarely happens.
Okay.
But it is Bob's meeting. It's a budget finance committee meeting.
Oh, so Bob runs the meeting, not the select board.
That's correct. Sometimes, though, I think for certain pieces, Bob, you've handed it over to the select board chair to run, like public safety, maybe. There have been times when you've done that, but not always.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we go?
So Abigail, I'll ask a question. Do you have a copy of the schedule, the meeting schedule? Do you have a copy of that? Okay, all right.
Yeah, and I've looked over the sections that are on the agenda for tonight.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Except I didn't have emergency public. So didn't have one tab that I thought maybe was supposed to be in there.
Yeah, that's there used to be a operating budget for emergency management, and I think that was primarily to back when the pandemic, and I may be speaking out of turn, and maybe Kathy can help us out here, but public safety used to have their own operating budget to track COVID or pandemic related expenses. So I know we're nearing, hopefully nearing the end of the pandemic, and I believe that's what that's all about.
Okay.
So there is no tab, but they can speak to that when their turn is up.
Just was checking that I didn't need to cram.
I don't see any other questions. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Dennis. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Very good. I will see you in about 20 minutes.
Same log on?
There's a separate one to log into this.
Okay, I gotta go back on the internet now, go on my computer and figure out which one that.
Good evening. Welcome to the first department head review with the Budget Finance Committee and Select Board. I'd like to call this meeting to order. First order of business. I'm Bob Goslin, Chairman of the Budget Finance Committee, and I will chair this meeting. We will start first with review of administration.
Right. Thank you, Bob. So first thing I'd like to do is introduce our new finance director, Charisse Keach. She wanted to give a brief explanation of some of the changes she's made in the budget development methodology, information contained in the books, the addition of notes, and some other things that she's done. So the budget doesn't look exactly like it did last year. Charisse?
Thank you, Bob and Dawn. Yeah, the new budget books, for starters, they have tabs for each of the departments, which I think to be helpful when you're flipping through, maybe a 100-page document. So there are tabs, and I want to call it check stock, but it's not check stock, it's paper stock in between the various departments. So that helps to, ease flipping through pages. The other couple of changes are, as Dawn mentioned, there are spreadsheets that contain 2 fiscal years of budget to actual. And then you have the current fiscal year budget, And year-to-date expenditures, keep in mind that's only through December 31st. So I know Kathy had asked about that and we clarified that. So I want to point that out. Your year-to-date expenditures only go through December 31st. Some of the departments I try, and this is, you know, a lot of it's for me personally, because I, you know, don't always necessarily remember where an item was budgeted when you have so many various departments. So I do like to make little notations beside various expenditures. So I've done that. Not on all of them, but some of them. And the other thing is some of the things have been moved around from one department to another, and I can go into those, you know, as an overview, excuse me, as an overview. As an example, Registry of Deeds was previously in the administration budget. I have now relocated that to the assessing budget. So that's one change. Another minor change is rescue billing. That was previously under administration, and that has been relocated to the fire department because that's what it has to do with, is public safety and fire and rescue department. And another change would be building maintenance. As an example, in Nathan's public works department, he had two building maintenance lines, one for District 1 and the other one just for public works. So what I did was relocate those all to town buildings. So it's town-wide buildings, building maintenance with the exception of public safety, because they have their own building maintenance line in their budget. So instead of having various building maintenance all over, you know, the general operating budget, it's pretty centralized into town buildings. So that's just a couple of the changes. I do like to regroup at the end of the budget process just to obtain feedback, you know, what worked well, what didn't work well, suggestions for improvement. I'm open to that. What you'd like to see different. I'm certainly, you know, willing to consider, you know, and accommodate everyone. And so we will eventually regroup and I will ask for feedback. Okay. That's all I have.
Right, thank you, Charisse.
You're welcome.
Don, did you want to start with a statement?
Yes, I have a brief statement, a brief outline of, I guess you'd call it the really high points of the budget. We'll get into much more detail as we go department by department. But I'd like to first start by saying that I did issue a new budget memo today, and the crush of getting things out the other day, you know, we thought we had made things really clear, but when I read it this morning, or maybe it was yesterday morning, I said, geez, it's not so clear, because at the addition of the issue of the library really made sort of a double set of budgets for us. And so there is a new cover letter that hopefully is clearer as to what's happening. So on that point, I'll tell you what the budget looks like at the start here with the library and without the library. So the gross budget without the library is up about $416,896 or 7.4%. If you net out the revenues from that gross budget without the library, you're looking at $251,623 or 7.4%. So an increase above what we normally would be presenting on initial budget. And then of course you have the gross budget with the library. So now you're adding a whole new department. You're taking on the whole library function. In that instance, you're looking at $551,772 increase or 9.89%. And then if you net out the revenues, you're down to about $386,499 or 11.36%. And I can, you know, let, I guess, Charisse explain why it's up, but it's a little bit of an odd phenomenon. But anyhow, so we're looking at a significant budget increase over what we have normally seen. But what we also have is a significant change in the operations of the town. You know, we've added a number of functions. I think the town is at a point where we're seeing, you know, some new programming and some new directions. And, you know, I credit our chair, Teresa Sadak, with a lot of the leadership that has caused that to come about. And I think it's positive stuff. And, you know, the town is in very good fiscal shape. You know, we continue to maintain our AAA bond rating. We are, you know, able to go from, you know, year to year without borrowing tax notes. We have put a substantial amount of fund balance into the, you know, into the tax rate every year, and we intend probably to do that again this year. So the town's in good fiscal shape. I think it's operating well. We have great town employees, and I think we've gone a little bit beyond what we used to call the so-called Raymond Way, which was just basic cable, what we are statutorily required to do government. We're doing a lot more than that today, and I think we're doing it very well. So that's my kind of pitch on where we're going. But for the department by department, the administration department, one of the things that's significant is we're going to go out and do an RFP for audit services. Now, the whole world, not only with the pandemic, but the municipal world is so different. There's only a limited number of firms that even do auditing anymore. So we're going to put the RFP out, see what we get. But some towns are not getting any responses. And what's clear is we're going to pay more. We're going to pay more for our audit. And so that's a big change. I mean, we used to have an environment where we had lots and lots of professional firms seeking town business. There are changes in the town clerk's elections budget, but I've learned from prior years, I'm going to let the town clerk detail those. So I'm not going to get into those. Under contract fees and services, that was included in the Roadrunner was included in contract fees and services in the FY 2022 budget. I think Charisse alluded to some moves in the budget. So that's been moved to the dues and publications budget for FY 2023. So anyhow, those are kind of the things that are happening in administration. And I probably should have had a percent by department number to give you on each one, but I actually don't have that on my outline, but you have that all in your budget book. I believe the administration budget was down just slightly on account of those moves. And so anyway, the code enforcement budget, of course, has now an assistant code officer. So that's a $71,000 increase in salaries. And so that's a significant difference there. But I can tell you that the addition of the second code officer has made an exponential difference in the efficiency of the office. We've gone from a position where we have seen, a number of complaints about services to 0 complaints about services. We're really, taking care of the much increased flow of work and the demand for permits. And we're also paying a very close attention to environmental issues and violations, which is really essential. It's a very important thing for a town like Raymond that is so dependent in our economy on our lakes and ponds. And so that's really been a very positive thing, the addition of the code enforcement officer, the second code enforcement officer or assistant. General assistance budget is up just slightly, but on that one, you want to keep in mind that 70% of the budget is reimbursed by the state of Maine. And, we don't know what's going to happen, but we think that a lot of what's happening with the general assistance budget is probably influenced by the pandemic. We hope and think that we'll go back to more normal levels, post-pandemic, but who really knows? We have, of course, our Raymond Community Assistance Fund to help with, the needs of people who find themselves struggling in this economy and just generally any time. So we've had great response from our citizens. We have people who put us on their annual giving plan. And so we have funds. So if anybody's out there listening who